Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I moved into the Riverside Apartments in Portland back in March. The rent was reasonable, the neighborhood seemed safe enough, and the landlord barely asked any questions. I needed that after everything that had gone wrong in Seattle. The apartment was on the 4th floor, corner unit, with windows that overlooked the parking lot and a small stretch of trees beyond the fence. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The building was old, built sometime in the 70s, and it showed. The hallway carpet was worn thin in the middle, the elevator groaned like it resented every trip, and the walls were that particular shade of beige that exists nowhere in nature. But the other tenants kept to themselves, which suited me fine. I worked from home doing data entry for an insurance company, so I spent most of my time alone anyway. About 2 weeks after I moved in, I found a maintenance request form slipped under my door. It was printed on yellow paper, the kind that feels slightly waxy, and it had my apartment number written at the top in blue ink. Below that, in the same handwriting, it said, "Checked bedroom closet. Found issue with back panel. Will return to fix." I hadn't submitted any maintenance requests. I hadn't even noticed anything wrong with the closet. But I figured maybe the landlord was being proactive, checking units for some building-wide problem. Water damage, maybe, or mold. I tossed the form on the kitchen counter and didn't think much more about it. That night, I went into the bedroom closet to hang up some clothes. The closet was small, barely a walk-in, with a single rod across the top and some wire shelving on the left side. The back wall was just drywall, painted the same flat white as the rest of the apartment. I ran my hand along it, looking for the issue the form had mentioned. Nothing. No cracks, no soft spots, no discoloration. It was solid. I called the building manager the next morning. Her name was Diane, a woman in her 60s who always wore reading glasses on a chain and smelled faintly of menthol cigarettes. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hi, Diane. This is Unit 412. I got a maintenance form yesterday about my closet." There was a pause. "I didn't send anyone to your unit." "Well, someone did. The form says they checked the back panel." Another pause. Longer this time. "What's the date on the form?" I pulled it from the counter. "There's no date. Just my apartment number and a note about the closet." "I'll look into it," she said, and hung up before I could say anything else. That should have been the end of it. But 2 days later, I found another form. Same yellow paper, same handwriting. This one said, "Inspected bedroom closet again. Back panel definitely loose. Scheduled repair for next visit." I didn't call Diane this time. I went straight to the closet and pressed on every inch of that back wall. Still solid. I even knocked on it, listening for hollow spots. Nothing. The whole thing felt ridiculous, but something about it made my skin crawl. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the building settle around me. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the closet. I told myself it was pipes. Old buildings make noise, but the tapping had a pattern to it. 3 quick taps. A pause, then 3 more. It went on for maybe 5 minutes, then stopped. I didn't go check. I just pulled the blanket over my head and waited for morning. The next day, I found a 3rd form. "Accessing closet space tonight. Please leave bedroom door unlocked." That's when I knew something was very wrong. I called Diane again, told her everything. She said she'd come up personally to check it out. She arrived an hour later with a maintenance guy named Roy, a thin man with a gray beard who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Roy went straight to the closet with a flashlight and a screwdriver. He tapped on the back panel, ran his fingers along the edges, then stopped. "Huh. What?" I asked. There's a seam here. Real faint, but it's there. He wedged the screwdriver into the corner and pried gently. The panel popped loose with a soft crack. Behind it was a space. Not a cavity in the wall, but an actual space. Maybe 3 feet deep, running the width of the closet. And inside that space was a folding chair, a flashlight, and a stack of yellow maintenance forms. Diane went pale. Roy just stood there, shaking his head. They called the police. Turns out the previous tenant, a man named Eric Drummond, had never actually moved out. He'd been evicted for non-payment, but instead of leaving, he'd built a false wall in the closet and been living in the crawl space between units. He'd been coming and going through the air vents at night, using the building's maintenance uniforms he'd stolen from the basement. They found him 3 days later, sleeping in the laundry room. He didn't resist. Just kept saying he'd left the form so I'd know he was taking care of things. I broke my lease the next week. Diane didn't argue. I still check behind every closet and every place I live. I press on the walls. I listen at night, and I never, ever leave my bedroom door unlocked. I worked at Halstead Data Solutions for 3 years before I put in my notice. It wasn't a bad job, just mind-numbing. 8 hours a day reviewing insurance claims, flagging inconsistencies, forwarding everything up the chain. The pay was decent, the benefits were fine, and my co-workers were the kind of people you could sit next to for years without ever really knowing. When I finally submitted my resignation, I felt this huge wave of relief. I'd already accepted a position at a smaller firm closer to home, better hours, less corporate nonsense. My manager, a woman named Sandra, who wore the same gray blazer every Monday, barely reacted. She just nodded and said HR would reach out about the exit interview. That email came 2 days later. Standard corporate language. As part of our offboarding process, all departing employees are required to complete an exit interview. Please report to conference room 7B on your final day at 4 p.m. Attendance is mandatory. I'd done exit interviews before at other jobs. They were always the same. Some HR person asking generic questions about why you're leaving, what could have been better, whether you'd recommend the company to others. You smile, say something vague and professional, and leave. Easy. My last day was a Friday. I spent most of it cleaning out my desk, deleting personal files, saying awkward goodbyes to people I'd never see again. By 4 o'clock, I was ready to be done. I took the elevator down to the 7th floor and found conference room 7B at the end of a long, quiet hallway. The door was unlocked. Inside was a small windowless room with a table, some 2 chairs, and a clock on the wall. No HR rep, no paperwork. Just a single sheet of paper on the table with my name printed at the top. I sat down and looked at the paper. It had 5 questions written in plain black text. Why are you leaving? What did you take? Who did you tell? What do you remember? Will you come back? The questions didn't make sense. The first one was normal, but the rest felt off. What did I take? I hadn't taken anything. Company policy was clear. No files, no supplies, nothing. I glanced at the clock. It was 4:03. I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No one came. The room was completely silent. No hum from the air vents, no muffled voices from the hallway. Just me and that piece of paper. At 4:15, I decided to leave. I stood up and reached for the door handle. It didn't turn. I tried again, harder this time. Locked. I knocked. No response. I knocked louder, called out. Nothing. I pulled out my phone. No signal, not even 1 bar. I tried the door again, yanking hard enough that my palm started to sting. It didn't budge. Then the lights went out. Not flickering, not dimming, just instantly black. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight. The beam barely cut through the darkness. I aimed it at the door, the walls, the table. Everything looked the same, but the air felt different. Heavier, like the room had shrunk. I sat back down, trying to stay calm. Someone would notice I was missing. Someone would come looking. I just had to wait. At 4:32, the paper on the table started to change. I watched as new words appeared beneath the original questions, forming slowly like they were being written by an invisible hand. Answer the questions. You cannot leave until you answer. My hands were shaking. I picked up the pen that had appeared beside the paper. I swear it hadn't been there before, and stared at the questions. I wrote, "Better opportunity." The words vanished. The question remained. I tried again. "I'm leaving for personal growth." Same thing. The ink disappeared like it had been erased. The second question pulsed slightly, like it was waiting. "What did you take?" I hadn't taken anything, but my mind started racing. Had I? I downloaded some files to my personal laptop months ago, just templates I'd created myself. I'd forwarded a few work emails to my personal account for reference. Nothing sensitive, nothing that mattered. I wrote, "Templates, emails." The words stayed. The question faded. The third question appeared darker now, more insistent. "Who did you tell?" "About what?" "About leaving. Everyone knew. I'd announced it in the team meeting." I wrote, "Everyone." The words vanished. The question remained, bolder. I thought harder. Who did I tell about? What? About the files? About the weird feeling I'd had the last few months, like someone was watching me through my computer screen? About the time I'd stayed late and heard voices in the server room, even though the building was supposed to be empty? I wrote, "No one." The question faded. What do you remember? I remember everything. I remember the job, the people, the endless grey cubicles. But as I sat there, staring at the question, I realized there were gaps, days I couldn't quite account for, meetings I didn't remember attending but had apparently been at, according to the calendar. Conversations people referenced that I had no memory of having. I wrote, "I don't know." The question dissolved. The final question sat there, waiting. "Will you come back?" I wanted to write no. I wanted to write never. But my hand wouldn't move. Something in the room shifted. The walls felt closer. The darkness pressed in. I wrote, "Yes." The lights came on. The door clicked open. The paper was gone. I walked out of that room, took the elevator down, and left the building. I didn't look back. The new job started the following Monday. It was fine at first. Better, even. But 3 weeks in, I got an email. No subject line. Just a single sentence. "Thank you for completing your exit interview. Your re-entry date is pending." I haven't opened my work laptop since. I don't answer calls from unknown numbers. And every time I pass an office building, I keep my head down and walk faster, because I know they're waiting. And I know I'll go back. I wrote, "Yes." When I bought the house on Mercer Street, the realtor mentioned the neighbors were quiet. She said it like it was a selling point, and I guess it was. I'd spent the last 5 years in a cramped apartment with paper-thin walls, listening to arguments and footsteps and televisions blaring at all hours. Quiet sounded perfect. The house itself was small but solid. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen that opened into a living room with wood floors that creaked in all the right places. The backyard was narrow, bordered on both sides by tall privacy fences. The one on the left belonged to an elderly woman named Mrs. Halloran, who I met exactly once. She'd waved from her porch the day I moved in, but I never saw her again. The fence on the right belonged to whoever lived at 4782. I never saw them either. That fence was strange. It was taller than the one on the left, at least 8 feet, made from solid planks of dark wood with no gaps between them. No knots, no warping, no weathering. It looked brand new, even though the house next door was clearly decades old. There was no gate, no way to see through. Just a flat, unbroken wall of wood stretching from the back of their house to the edge of the property line. I didn't think much of it at first. People value their privacy. I get that. But then I started noticing the sounds. It started about a week after I moved in. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping coming from the other side of the fence. Not loud, but persistent, steady like someone bouncing a basketball, except slower. It went on for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same rhythm. I stepped out onto the back porch and listened. The thumping was definitely coming from their yard, but I couldn't tell what was causing it. I thought about knocking on their front door, introducing myself, maybe asking about it. But something stopped me. I'm not sure what. Just a feeling. The sounds changed after that. Some nights it was scraping, like metal dragging across concrete. Other nights it was a low murmur, almost like conversation, but too muffled to make out words. Once I heard what sounded like crying, soft, broken sobs that lasted for hours. I started avoiding the backyard. One Saturday morning I was mowing the lawn when I noticed something near the base of the fence. A small gap had opened up between 2 of the planks, maybe half an inch wide. I crouched down and peered through. At first, I couldn't see anything, just darkness. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized I was looking at dirt. Not grass, just bare, dark soil, packed flat and smooth. No plants, no weeds, nothing growing, and in the center of that dirt, about 10 feet from the fence, was a wooden post. Someone was tied to it. I jerked back, heart pounding. I looked again, slower this time, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a person, I was sure of it. They were sitting on the ground, slumped forward, wrists bound to the post behind them. They weren't moving. I stood up, pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. 911, what's your emergency? I think someone's hurt. Next door, in the backyard. They're tied up. What's your location? I gave her the address, my address, and tried to explain. She kept asking questions. Was the person moving? Did I know the neighbors? Had I heard anything unusual? And I answered as best I could. She said officers were on the way and to stay inside. I didn't. I went back to the fence, crouched down, and looked through the gap again. The post was still there, but the person was gone. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, one older with gray stubble, the other younger and sharper around the eyes. I explained everything, showed them the gap in the fence, told them what I'd seen. They listened without interrupting, then walked next door to knock on the front door of 4782. No one answered. They knocked again, harder this time, announced themselves. Still nothing. The older officer walked around to the side of the house, trying to see into the backyard, but the fence was too high. He came back shaking his head. "We can't enter the property without probable cause or a warrant," he said. "You said the person wasn't moving when you saw them." "No, they were just sitting there. And now they're gone." "Yes." He exchanged a glance with the younger officer. "We'll file a report. Keep an eye out. If you see anything else, call us immediately." They left. I stood in my driveway and watched them drive away, feeling sick. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that post, that slumped figure, the way the dirt had looked so smooth and deliberate. Around 2 a.m, I heard the thumping again. I got out of bed, walked to the back door, and stepped outside. The yard was dark except for the faint glow from the streetlights filtering through the trees. The thumping was louder now, more insistent. I crept toward the fence and crouched down by the gap. This time I could see more. There was a lantern hanging from a hook on the back of the house, casting a weak yellow light across the yard. The dirt was the same, flat and empty. But near the far corner, I saw movement. Someone was digging. They had their back to me, hunched over a shovel, working steadily. Every few seconds they'd stop, lift the shovel, and toss the dirt into a pile beside them. The hole was already deep, maybe 4 feet, maybe more. I should have gone inside. I should have called the police again, but I stayed there, frozen, watching. The person stopped digging. They straightened up, wiped their hands on their pants, and turned around. I couldn't see their face. The light was too dim, and they were too far away, but they were looking directly at the fence. Directly at me. They tilted their head like they were listening. Then they started walking toward me. I scrambled back, heart slamming in my chest, and ran inside. I locked the door, turned off all the lights, and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. The thumping stopped. I stayed there until morning. The next day, I called a fencing company and had them install a tarp along my side of the fence, blocking the gap completely. It cost me $300 I didn't have, but I didn't care. I couldn't look over there anymore. The sounds continued. Some nights louder, some nights softer. I learned to ignore them. I started sleeping with earplugs and a fan running to drown out the noise. But 2 weeks ago, something changed. I came home from work and found an envelope taped to my front door. No postage, no return address. Just my name written in careful block letters. Inside was a single photograph. It was my backyard, taken from the other side of the fence, looking toward my house. I was in the picture, standing on the porch, talking on my phone. I remembered that moment. It was 3 days ago. On the back of the photo, written in the same block letters, was a single sentence. Thank you for not looking. I put the house on the market the next day. I took the overnight security job at Pinehurst Storage because I needed the money and didn't mind being alone. The facility was just outside Corvallis, Oregon, tucked back from the highway behind a stand of Douglas firs. It wasn't fancy, just rows of identical garage-style units, a small office building, and a gate that opened with a keycard. My job was simple. Sit in the office from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., monitor the cameras, and make sure no one broke in. The owner, a guy named Dale, showed me around on my first night. He was in his 60s with a gray ponytail and the kind of relaxed demeanor that comes from years of not caring about much. He walked me through the camera system, showed me how to log incidents, and handed me a flashlight and a ring of keys. Most nights, nothing happens, he said. Sometimes you'll get someone who forgot their code or kids trying to hop the fence. Just call the non-emergency line if anything looks off. What about the units? I asked. Do I need to check them? Only if an alarm goes off. Each unit has a sensor. If a door opens after hours, you'll get an alert on the computer. He pointed to the screen. Just make a note of the unit number and check the camera feed. 9 times out of 10, it's someone who lost track of time. He left around midnight. I locked the office door behind him and settled in. The first few nights were exactly like he'd described. Quiet. Boring. I spent most of my time reading, watching videos on my phone, and glancing at the monitor every so often. The camera feeds cycled through 12 views, the front gate, the back fence line, and 10 different angles covering the rows of units. Everything was grainy and gray, lit by motion sensor floodlights that only activated when something moved. On my 4th night, I got my first alert. It was just after 2 a.m. The computer beeped and a message popped up. Unit 47, door open. I clicked on the corresponding camera feed. Unit 47 was in the middle of row C, about halfway down. The camera showed the door rolled halfway up, the interior dark. No movement, no vehicle nearby. I grabbed the flashlight and keys and headed out. The facility was dead silent at night. My footsteps echoed off the pavement as I walked down row C, counting units. When I reached 47, I stopped. The door was open, just like the camera had shown. I shone the flashlight inside. The unit was empty, completely empty. No boxes, no furniture, nothing. Just bare concrete and metal walls. I stepped closer, checking the corners. Still nothing. I pulled the door down and locked it, then walked back to the office. I logged the incident, Unit 47, door ajar, secured, and forgot about it. It happened again 2 nights later. Same unit, same open door, same empty interior. This time I checked the rental records. Unit 47 was listed as vacant. No one had rented it in over 3 months. I called Dale the next morning and told him. He sighed. The latch on that one's been weird. I'll send someone to fix it next week. But it wasn't the latch. I checked it myself the next night. The lock was solid. The door was heavy, industrial-grade steel. It wasn't opening on its own. On my 8th night, the pattern changed. The alert came at 2:04 a.m. Unit 47 again. I pulled up the camera feed, expecting to see the door open like before. It wasn't. The door was closed, but someone was standing in front of it. I leaned closer to the monitor, squinting. The figure was just standing there, facing the camera. They weren't moving. No car, no flashlight. Just standing. I grabbed the radio Dale had given me for emergencies and clipped it to my belt. Then I took the flashlight and headed out. Row C was darker than usual. One of the floodlights had burned out, leaving a long stretch of shadow between units 44 and 52. I walked slowly, keeping the flashlight aimed ahead. When I reached Unit 47, no one was there. I checked the door, locked. I shone the light around the area. Nothing. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there. I stood there for a minute, listening. The only sound was the faint hum of the highway in the distance. I went back to the office and reviewed the footage. The figure had been there. I watched it 3 times. They stood in front of Unit 47 for exactly 4 minutes. Then the feed glitched, just a flicker, maybe half a second, and they were gone. I didn't sleep well that day. The next night I came in early and checked every camera. Everything looked normal. I logged in, made coffee, and settled into the chair. I told myself I'd imagined it. Glitchy cameras, shadows, late-night paranoia. At 2:04 a.m. the alert came again. Unit 47, door open. I pulled up the feed. The door was rolled all the way up this time, and inside the unit, illuminated by my own floodlight, was a person. They were sitting on the floor back against the far wall, knees pulled up to their chest. Their head was down. They weren't moving. My hands started shaking. I picked up the phone to call the police, then hesitated. What would I even say? Someone sitting in an empty storage unit? I grabbed the flashlight and went out. I approached slowly, heart pounding. The door was open. The person was still inside, exactly as I'd seen on the camera. I stopped about 10 feet away. "Hey," I called out. "You can't be in there." No response. I stepped closer. "This is private property. I need you to leave." Still nothing. I raised the flashlight, aiming it directly at them. The beam lit them up. They were wearing a dark jacket, jeans, sneakers. Their head was still down, face hidden. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now." Slowly, they lifted their head. It was me. I was looking at myself. Same face, same clothes, same scar on my left eyebrow from a childhood fall. The only difference was the expression, blank, empty. I stumbled backward, flashlight shaking in my hand. The figure stood up, still staring at me. Then it stepped forward, out of the unit, into the light. I ran. I made it back to the office, slammed the door and locked it. I pulled up the camera feed. Unit 47 was empty. The door was closed. I watched the footage. There was nothing. No figure, no open door. Just me, running. I quit the next morning. Dale didn't ask why. He just nodded and said he'd mail my last check. I still drive past that facility sometimes on my way to my new job. I never looked directly at it. But once, just once, I glanced over. Unit 47's door was open, and someone was standing in front of it, watching the road. My brother died on a Tuesday. Heart attack. He was only 34. No warning, no prior health issues. He just collapsed at work, and by the time the paramedics arrived, he was gone. I found out from my mom. She called me at 6 in the morning, and I knew before I even picked up. No one calls at 6 unless something's wrong. Her voice was flat, mechanical, like she was reading from a script. "Andrew's dead," she said. "I need you to come home." I lived 4 states away, but I packed a bag and drove straight through. 12 hours. I didn't stop except for gas. I didn't cry. I just drove. The funeral was small. Andrew didn't have a lot of friends. He was quiet, kept to himself, worked IT for a mid-sized firm in Spokane. The people who came were mostly family, and a few co-workers who looked uncomfortable in suits. The service was short. Pastor said some generic things about God's plan and eternal rest. I stopped listening halfway through. After the burial, I stayed at my mom's house for a few days. We didn't talk much. Just sat in the living room, her watching television, me staring at my phone. I kept expecting Andrew to call. That's how it felt, like he was just late, like he'd show up any minute with some excuse. On the 3rd day, he did. I was lying in the guest room around 11 at night when my phone buzzed. A voicemail notification. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was local. I played the message. Static at first. Then Andrew's voice. "Hey, it's me. I know this is weird, but I need you to do something for me." I sat up, heart racing. The voice was unmistakable. The cadence, the slight rasp he got when he was tired. It was him. "There's a box in my apartment, under the bed. Don't open it. Just take it to the storage unit on Maple and Division. Unit 12. The code is 4739. Leave the box inside and lock it. Don't tell anyone. Please." The message ended. I played it again and again. Same voice, same words. I checked the timestamp. The voicemail had come in at 10:47 p.m., 3 days after Andrew died. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. A recording. It had to be. Maybe he'd set it up before he died. Some kind of delayed message. But why? And why me? The next morning, I drove to his apartment. My mom had given me his keys, asked me to start sorting through his things. I hadn't been able to bring myself to do it yet, but now I had a reason. The apartment was exactly how I remembered it. Small, tidy, almost impersonal. Andrew wasn't big on decorating. He had a couch, a television, a desk with a computer, and a bed. That was it. I went straight to the bedroom and knelt down beside the bed. There was a box underneath, just like he'd said. It was wooden, about the size of a shoebox, with a small brass latch on the front. No lock. I could have opened it easily. I didn't. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, and something inside shifted slightly when I moved it. I carried it out to my car and set it on the passenger seat. The storage facility was 10 minutes away. I found Unit 12 on the 2nd floor of a long industrial building. I punched in the code, 4739, and the lock clicked open. Inside was nothing, just an empty concrete space, maybe 6 feet by 6 feet. I set the box down in the center, stepped back, and pulled the door shut. The lock engaged automatically. I stood there for a minute, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. I drove back to my mom's house and tried to forget about it, but the voicemails didn't stop. The next one came 2 days later. Same number, same voice. Thanks for doing that. I need you to do one more thing. Go to the storage unit, open the box, take out the phone inside. Don't turn it on. Just bring it to 4521 Riverside Drive. Leave it on the porch. Don't knock. I deleted the message. I wasn't doing it. Whatever this was, some cruel prank, some AI-generated thing, I wasn't playing along. But the voicemails kept coming. One every night, always around 10:47. Always Andrew's voice. Always instructions. Go to the storage unit. Open the box. Take the phone. On the 5th night, I broke. I drove back to the storage facility, opened Unit 12 and picked up the box. This time, I opened it. Inside was a phone, an old flip phone, the kind no one used anymore. It was off, no charger, no SIM card visible, just the phone. I took it. I drove to 4521 Riverside Drive. It was a house, small, run down, with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. No lights on inside. I walked up to the porch and set the phone down by the door. As I turned to leave, I heard it. The phone rang. I looked back. The phone I just set down was ringing, screen glowing faintly in the dark. I picked it up and answered. Hello? Andrew's voice. You shouldn't have opened the box. The line went dead. I dropped the phone and ran. I haven't been back to Spokane since. I changed my number. I don't listen to voicemails anymore. I don't even look at my phone after dark. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it. Faint and far away, but unmistakable. Andrew's voice, calling my name. If you're still listening, you probably enjoy stories like this. A like or a comment helps keep them alive. I found the apartment on Craigslist. Basement unit, utilities included, $200 a month. The ad didn't have pictures, just an address and a phone number. I called, expecting a scam or a scumbag landlord, but the guy who answered sounded normal. Older. Tired. He said his name was Ed, that he owned the house and that the apartment had been empty for a few months. Why so cheap? I asked. It's small, and it's a basement. Most people don't like basements. I didn't care. I was broke, 2 weeks from being evicted from my current place, and I needed something fast. I met him that afternoon. The house was in a quiet neighborhood in Tacoma, older homes with big yards and trees that blocked out most of the streetlights. Ed was waiting on the porch when I pulled up. He was maybe 65, gray hair, stooped shoulders, wearing a flannel shirt that had seen better days. He shook my hand and led me around to the side of the house, where a separate entrance led down a short flight of concrete steps. This is it, he said, unlocking the door. It's got a bedroom, a bathroom, and a little kitchenette. No windows, but the lights work fine. The apartment was exactly as he'd described. Small, dim, clean enough. The walls were concrete, painted white, and the floor was linoleum that had yellowed with age. It smelled faintly of bleach and dampness, but it was livable. I'll take it, I said. He handed me the keys. I moved in the next day. I didn't have much. Clothes, a laptop, a mattress I dragged down the steps myself. By evening I was settled. I made ramen on the 2-burner stove and lay on the mattress, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The first few nights were fine. Quiet. The walls were thick enough that I couldn't hear much from the main house. Occasionally I'd hear footsteps above me, the faint murmur of a television, but nothing intrusive. Then, on the fourth night, I heard the knocking. It came from the wall beside the bed. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I sat up and listened. Nothing. I waited. Then 3 more knocks. Same rhythm, same spot. I got up and pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. I knocked back just to see. No response. I went back to bed. The knocking didn't come again that night, but it came the next night, and the night after that. Always 3 knocks. Always the same wall. Always around 2 in the morning. On the 7th night, I asked Ed about it. I knocked on the front door of the main house, and he answered, looking surprised to see me. "Something wrong?" he asked. "I keep hearing knocking. From the wall next to my bed. Is there another unit down there, or maybe pipes?" He frowned. "No other unit, and the pipes are on the other side. You sure it's not just the house settling?" "It's not settling, it's knocking. 3 knocks, same time every night." He looked uncomfortable. "I'll check it out." He didn't. The knocking continued. But now it was louder, more insistent, and it had started moving. First the wall beside the bed, then the wall behind it, then the ceiling. I started sleeping with headphones in, music playing loud enough to drown out the sound. But I could still feel it, the vibration of the knocks, 3 beats, steady and deliberate. On the 10th night, the knocking stopped. Instead, I woke up to find the door to my apartment open. Not broken, not forced, just open. I always locked it, always. I got up and checked the lock. It was still engaged. The door had been opened from the inside. I went back to bed, dragged the mattress against the door, and didn't sleep. The next night I found something in the kitchenette. A cup I didn't own, sitting on the counter, half filled with water. I dumped it out and threw the cup in the trash. The next morning it was back on the counter. Full again. I started looking for a new place. But every time I tried to leave for a viewing, something stopped me. My car wouldn't start. My phone would die. Once I made it halfway down the block before I realized I'd forgotten my wallet. When I went back, the apartment door was open again. I stopped trying to leave. On the 15th night, I woke up to someone standing at the foot of my mattress. They were just standing there, facing me, silhouetted in the dim light from the kitchenette. I couldn't make out features, just the shape of a person. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stared. After what felt like an hour, they turned and walked into the bathroom. The door closed softly behind them. I waited until morning. The bathroom was empty. The door was locked from the outside. I packed my things. I didn't care about the lease, the deposit, any of it. I just needed out. But when I tried to leave, the door wouldn't open. The lock was fine. The hinges were fine. It just wouldn't budge. I called Ed. He didn't answer. I tried again and again. On the 4th call, someone picked up. "Hello?" It wasn't Ed's voice. It was mine. I hung up. I'm still here. I've stopped trying to leave. The knocking has stopped too. Now I just hear footsteps. They circle the apartment every night, slow and steady, stopping occasionally at the foot of the mattress. I don't look anymore. I'd been on the boundary trail for 3 days when I found the shelter. It wasn't marked on my map, and I hadn't seen it mentioned in any of the trail reports. But there it was, a small wooden structure just off the path, maybe 50 feet into the trees. The trail runs through the North Cascades, winding through old-growth forest and alpine meadows. I'd planned the trip for early September, hoping to beat the first snows. I was hiking solo, carrying everything I needed in a 40-pound pack. I'd done trips like this before. I liked the solitude. The shelter looked old but solid. It was built from logs with a slanted roof and a single door hanging slightly ajar. There were no windows. A rusted metal stovepipe jutted from the roof, and a stack of firewood sat beside the entrance, covered with a tarp. I almost kept walking. Shelters like this were usually maintained by the Forest Service or volunteer groups, meant for emergencies or overnight stops, but something about it felt off. Too isolated. Too quiet. Still, it was getting late, and the sky had that heavy grey look that comes before rain. I decided to check it out. The door creaked when I pushed it open. Inside was a single room, maybe 10 by 10 feet. There was a cot against one wall, a small table, and a wood stove in the corner. Everything was coated in a thin layer of dust, but otherwise it looked functional. Someone had been here recently. There was a half-burned log in the stove, and the cot had a folded blanket on it. I dropped my pack and looked around. There was a logbook on the table, the kind you find at some trailheads where hikers sign in. I flipped it open. The last entry was dated 3 weeks ago. It read, "Stayed one night, left early. Something's wrong with this place." I turned the page. The entry before that was from 2 months prior. "Do not stay here. Do not sleep." I kept flipping, entry after entry, all of them vague warnings. Heard something outside. Felt like I was being watched. Door wouldn't stay closed. I should have left, but the rain started. Heavy, sudden, pounding against the roof. I told myself I'd just wait it out. Maybe an hour, then keep moving. I sat on the cot and ate an energy bar, listening to the rain. The shelter was dark, the only light coming from the open door. I thought about lighting the stove, but decided against it. I didn't plan on staying long. Around 6 o'clock, I heard the footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, crunching through the wet undergrowth outside. I stood up and moved to the door, peering out. The forest was dim, soaked in rain. I couldn't see anyone. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Nothing. I closed the door and latched it. There wasn't a lock, just a simple hook and eye latch that wouldn't stop anyone who really wanted in. But it made me feel better. The footsteps started again. This time, they were circling the shelter. Slow, methodical, always just out of sight. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to track them. They went around once, twice, then stopped directly in front of the door. I held my breath. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I unlatched the door and pulled it open. No one was there, just rain and trees. I stepped outside, looking around. The clearing was empty, but in the mud, just a few feet from the door, were footprints. Bare feet, human-sized but wrong. The toes were too long, the heel too narrow. I backed into the shelter and latched the door. The knocking came again, 3 times. Then silence. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the cot, pack in my lap, ready to run. The knocking didn't come back, but I heard other sounds. Scratching, whispers. Once, something pressed against the door hard enough to make the wood groan. By morning, the rain had stopped. I packed quickly and left, not bothering to close the door behind me. I hiked straight through, not stopping until I reached the trailhead 2 days later. When I got home, I looked up the shelter. I couldn't find any record of it. No Forest Service listings, no trail maps, nothing. I called the ranger station. The woman who answered said there were no maintained shelters on that section of trail. When I described the location, she went quiet. "If you saw a structure out there," she said finally, "you shouldn't have gone inside." I asked why. She didn't answer. She just said, "A lot of people don't come back from that trail. I haven't hiked solo since." I worked nights cleaning office buildings. It was easy, mindless work. I'd show up at 10, vacuum the floors, empty the trash, wipe down the bathrooms, and leave by 6. Most of the buildings were the same. Corporate offices, law firms, dental practices. Places that were busy during the day and dead silent at night. The building on 7th and Pine was different. It was an older structure, 8 floors, built in the 30s. The company that hired me said it was mostly vacant. A few small businesses on the lower floors, but the upper levels had been empty for years. My job was to clean the lobby, the stairwells, and the 3rd-floor office suite that was still occupied. The first night was fine. The building was quiet, the lights worked, and I finished early. The second night, I noticed the elevator. It was one of those old cage elevators with a metal gate you had to pull closed manually. The company had told me not to use it, said it was broken, but that night when I walked past it, the gate was open. I closed it and kept working. The next night it was open again, and the elevator was on the 5th floor, even though I'd left it on the 1st. I asked my supervisor about it. He said the building manager probably used it. I didn't argue. But the elevator kept moving. Every night I'd find it on a different floor. Sometimes the gate was open. Sometimes it was closed. Once I heard it moving while I was cleaning the 3rd floor. The cables groaned, the car rattled, and it stopped on the floor just above me. I didn't check. On my 6th night, I found footprints. Wet footprints leading from the elevator to the stairwell. They were small, like a child's, and they left faint marks on the tile. I followed them up to the 4th floor where they stopped in the middle of an empty hallway. No doors open, no wet trail leading back, just the prints ending abruptly. I left early that night. The next week I started hearing the voice. It was faint, like someone whispering just out of earshot. It always came from the upper floors. I'd be vacuuming the lobby, and I'd hear it. Soft, lilting, almost musical. I couldn't make out words, just the tone. One night I decided to check. I took the stairs up to the 7th floor, flashlight in hand. The hallway was long and narrow, lined with doors to offices that hadn't been used in decades. The carpet was stained, the wallpaper peeling. It smelled like mildew and old wood. The whispering was louder up here. It was coming from the far end of the hall. I walked slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The whispering stopped as I got closer. I reached the last door. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Inside was an empty office. Desk, chair, filing cabinet. Everything covered in dust. But on the desk was a piece of paper. Fresh, white, not dusty. I picked it up. It was a list. Names, dozens of them, written in pencil in small, neat handwriting. I didn't recognize any of them. At the bottom of the list was my name. I dropped the paper and left. I quit the next day. My supervisor didn't ask why. He just said he'd find someone else. 2 weeks later, I saw a news article. A cleaner had fallen down the elevator shaft in that building. The elevator had been on the 1st floor. The gate had been open. They said it was an accident. The cleaner's name was on the list. When I moved to Seattle for grad school, I couldn't afford to live alone. I found a roommate through a university housing board, a guy named Parker. We met once before I moved in, just a quick coffee to make sure we weren't completely incompatible. He seemed fine, quiet, clean, older than most grad students. He said he was finishing a PhD in philosophy. The apartment was in Capitol Hill, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. My room was small but decent. Parker's room was at the end of the hall, door always closed. He had one rule: don't go in his room. I didn't care. I'm not nosy. I just wanted a place to sleep and study. The first month was fine. We kept to ourselves. He was gone a lot, usually at the library or teaching. When he was home, he stayed in his room. We'd exchange pleasantries in the kitchen. But that was it. Then I started noticing things. Small things at first. My coffee mug would be in the sink. even though I'd left it on the counter. The bathroom door would be locked from the inside, even though no one was in there. Once, I came home to find all the chairs in the living room facing the wall. I asked Parker about it. He just shrugged. Maybe you did it and forgot. I didn't forget. The second month, it got worse. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps that stopped outside my door. I'd lie there, listening, waiting for the knob to turn. It never did. One night, I got up and opened the door. Parker was standing in the hallway facing the wall, not moving, just standing there. Parker? He didn't respond. I said his name again, louder. He turned around slowly. His eyes were open, but he wasn't seeing me. He walked past me, back to his room, and closed the door. The next morning I asked him about it. He said he didn't remember. I sleepwalk sometimes, he said. Sorry if I scared you. I let it go, but then I found the list. I was cleaning the living room, moving the couch to vacuum underneath, and I found a folded piece of paper. I opened it. It was a list of names. 20, maybe 30 names, all crossed out except 2. One of them was mine. I confronted Parker. He denied knowing anything about it. Said it wasn't his. But I'd seen his handwriting before, on grocery lists, on notes he'd leave on the fridge. It was the same. I started looking for a new place that night. But the next morning, my name was crossed out, and Parker was gone. I used to work at a small AM radio station in rural Montana, KDRV, 1240 on the dial. It was a dying station, the kind that played old country songs and farm reports. Most of our listeners were over 60. The signal barely reached past the county line. I was the overnight DJ, midnight to 6. My job was to play the pre-programmed playlist, read the occasional PSA, and make sure the station stayed on the air. Easy money for a night owl. The studio was in an old house on the edge of town. The broadcast equipment was ancient, held together with duct tape and prayer. The owner, a man named Carl, kept saying he'd upgraded, but he never did. I was alone most nights. Just me, the music, and the hum of the transmitter in the back room. One night, around 2 a.m, the request line rang. We didn't get many calls that late. I answered. Static. Hello? I said, KDRV. More static. Then faintly, a voice. Play it again. Play what? The line went dead. I shrugged it off. Wrong number, probably. I went back to the playlist. 10 minutes later, the line rang again. Same voice. Play it again. I'm sorry, I don't know what you're asking for. The last song. Play it again. I checked the log. The last song was an old Hank Williams track. I queued it up and played it again. The line rang immediately. Thank you. Click. It became a pattern. Every night, around 2, the line would ring. Same voice. Same request. Play it again. Always the last song. After a week, I asked Carl about it. He said the station used to get a regular caller years ago, an old woman who lived alone. She'd call every night and request the same song, but she'd been dead for 5 years. I stopped answering the request line after that, but the calls didn't stop. The phone would ring, and I'd let it go to voicemail. In the morning, I'd check the messages. Same voice, same request. One night, the power went out. The whole building went dark. The transmitter shut off. Silence. Then, from the back room, I heard it. A radio, playing faintly. The last song I'd played before the power died. I went to check. The equipment was off. Everything was off. But the music kept playing. I left that night and never went back. KDRV shut down a month later. The building's been empty ever since. But sometimes, late at night, if you're driving through that part of Montana and tune your radio to 1240s, you'll hear it. The last song, playing on a loop. and a voice, faint and distant, asking you to play it again.